Shabbat Shalom. So I know it may have felt in the Torah reading that our ancestors were working away like dogs in the desert to build the Mishkan. But take a step to reflect. What actually did they have to do apart from that? They were in the middle of the wilderness, yes, but how were they being fed? Manna, right? They had manna. Man came down from the heavens. All they had to do was go out in the morning, gather a little bit. Didn't matter whether you gathered a lot or a little. It was enough for each person who went out. No problem. So you're talking, what, 20 minutes worth of getting something to eat that day. And where did they get their water from? God provided that too, most famously through the well of Miriam. And that meant that they were not schlepping 5 miles each way uphill to get a bucket of water. It was right there in the middle of the camp. No problem. Those were the two major problems for every pre-modern world, taken care of like that. Right? You'd barely woken up and you'd already taken care of your day's needs. So doing a little extra weaving or a little hammering, that's not so much to ask. How many of you, as you're reflecting upon your work week, are like, I might trade what I normally do. If someone's going to give me free food and free water and a place to live every single day, why am I working so hard at the office? Why am I still going in? Would you trade places for the Israelites back there? And add on top of it, of course, but wait, don't act now. There's more. You also get to hear Torah directly from God and Moses. You also get to experience all of the miracles of the Exodus. You get protection from God from all enemies about. Deal's getting pretty good, isn't it? Not so bad. And yet, do you think that every single one of the Israelites recognized the beautiful blessings that they were experiencing? Of course not. Because not only have we already seen the incident of the golden calf, but once we reach the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, we are going to get complaint after complaint after complaint of, boy, things were so much better in Egypt, weren't they? What? Egyptians didn't give you free food. I mean, they fed you the same way they fed their animals because you were slaves. But think of how they made you work and toil and killed your children. This is not exactly a better deal than what you've got going right now. But that then proves the aphorisms that we often hear. The grass is always greener on the other side. Right? The grass is always greener. When someone says that, what are they trying to remind you? What's that? Is it better over there? When you say the grass is greener, is that usually how that term is used? No, it's to mean you think the grass is greener only because you aren't on that side of the fence. If you were in that side of the fence, you wouldn't think the grass was so green. Right? The Israelites were able to be nostalgic for Egypt because they weren't in Egypt. While they lived in Egypt, they cried out to God to get them out of there. We only appreciate things when we're not actually experiencing them, because when we're not actually experiencing them, we can imagine them to have all sorts of qualities that they don't actually have that make it an attractive alternative to the problems we are currently experiencing in the reality we actually know. That is to say, our own lives, we know in intimate detail all of the problems that we face. But the lives of someone else, whether they be the ancient Israelites or whether they be someone posting on Instagram or Facebook, we only get a glimpse of what we think those lives might be. Oftentimes, in those social media cases, the most curated and dramatized version of those lives possible, bearing almost no relationship to actual reality. And now with easy AI photo and video generation, quite frankly, having no relationship to reality. And yet, we continue to ignore that truism, that the grass is greener, implying it's not really greener, it's only because you can't see what's on that side of the fence. But there is a twist on that aphorism of telling someone the grass is greener. Because usually when you tell somebody that, you're telling them the basics of what we've gotten so far, which is don't try to compare your life to that. It's probably not all it's cracked up to be. Just like living in the ancient Israel society, leaving Egypt would not be so hot, because it'd be hot in a way that even Floridians are not prepared for. And I also would like to draw your attention to their lack of plumbing. And that may be fine for the water supply, but for the other direction that the water flows in our modern world, that ain't there. So unless you're really okay with digging your latrines, there are some pretty significant downsides to living in that time period. And that's something we always have to be careful about. When we tell somebody comparison is the thief of joy, we better make darn sure that in fact the comparison that they are making is illegitimate. Because sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. So, how do we know the difference? Well, I'm going to give you a 3-step process of how to tell whether a comparison that is something that is bothering you is something worth letting bother you, or whether it is something that you can dismiss. So, step number 1, make sure that things actually look better for the other person, the other situation, than they actually do for you. That's just sort of a basic reality check. Wow, they seem to have a big house, they've got a big car, they got a fancy life. That seems a lot better than what I've got. Okay, good check. Now, in part 1, you have to check a little bit more in depth than that. Just noticing the brand of car that someone is driving doesn't tell you as much as you might think. It would tell you about the quality of life that they are living. It only tells you about a vehicle in and of itself. I was raised with a very famous story from my family history of somebody who would pull up to the synagogue in a Rolls Royce. And that Rolls Royce was filthy. And the adage around the town was, now that's class. When you are so rich, you don't even have to worry about keeping your royals shiny. That means you have really made it, man. You are so far up, you don't even care what the peasants think about your dirty Rolls. The woman who was driving the Rolls committed suicide shortly later. Was her life really that much better? No. But from the outside, did people imagine it to be better because they could not penetrate the facade, because they were not willing to even ask how she's actually doing, because they assumed they knew how she was because she had a dirty Royals, which was apparently the cat's meow. That's how long ago this story began. And that's part of the problem, is we don't really understand what that other person's life is. They might have the fancy car. They might even seem to be displaying it in a way that makes you very envious. But things can be significantly wrong in their life, and they could be desperately in need of help if only you knew. All right, so let's imagine, though, that in fact they've got that Rolls and it's dirty and they're doing just fine. They are the happiest clam you could possibly be. Step 2, does it affect your life? This is the one where we usually trip, because when we recognize someone else as doing fine, and we've done our due diligence to say it's both real and they really are doing fine, our immediate reaction is to devalue what we currently have, what we currently experience in relative ratio to what they have. They've got a nicer car and they're doing fine in every other measure, therefore my car is trash. But that's not true. If what you have is doing just fine for you, regardless of what they have, even if what they have is better, then you're okay. If they're having filet mignon and you're having a hamburger, that's okay. You're still eating. You still got food in your stomach. They are not living a life that is leaps and bounds better than yours, because there's, after all, only so much you can shove in your mouth in order to eat. And there's a law of diminishing returns on how much benefit that will give you. You can recognize that what they are experiencing may not be yours. It may even be in some measures better than what you have, but it doesn't diminish, it doesn't detract, it doesn't take away a single moment of the joy that is still available in your life. This is where we trip. Because as simple primates, we judge ourselves based upon those around us. And we judge our success, and we judge our status within the troop based upon what someone else has. If another monkey has 10 apples and I only have 5 apples, I feel poor. Even if 5 apples are more apples than any monkey's possibly going to eat. It just feels like I'm at the wrong end of the hierarchy. And Judaism tells us, don't count the apples of the other monkey. If you've got enough, that's okay. Be happy with your portion. If your portion is sufficient, the fact that someone else has an abundance doesn't matter. Until we get to step 3 where it does. Because occasionally, we can go through step 1 and recognize, indeed, someone else has more than I do, and it is real, and they are not suffering from it in quiet agony. They are doing fine. And step 2, I can look at what they've got and try to compare whether or not it affects me at all. And I might end up on the side of, well, yeah, actually, that does. I can be an Irish peasant in the middle of the 1800s, and the British have taken over my country, and have done for quite some time, forced me to live only on potatoes, and grow wheat for them for their export. And when my potatoes start dying from a blight, refuse to allow me to eat the wheat that I've grown, because it will sell for a higher price elsewhere. You know what? That's a comparison worth pursuing. That is something that you are it's worthwhile to get angry over. Because now, not only is it a real inequality, and not only is it something that cannot be simply waved away as it's not harming me, but it is something as well that you can do something about. And ultimately, that's why Judaism doesn't say never compare yourself to others, never wonder whether your station is where it should be. It simply means go through the steps to make sure that the only things you are worried about are those that are real and those that are matter. And most things don't matter, and many more things in the modern world aren't even real as far as a distinction. But for those that are real and those that do matter, do something about it. Whether it be, if you're that Irish peasant, getting on a boat and sailing to America, which is why there are more Irish people outside of Ireland than there are inside of Ireland because of this problem, and America in particular has benefited from the wealth of information, ingenuity, and determination that Irish immigrants brought to this country. Or kick the British out, sorry to my British wife, and get control back of your land. It's okay, she's perfectly on board with the loss of the British Empire, it's okay. And take control of your land again. There are usually things that we can do, whether it be on the grandiose international stage or whether it be in our own life. That someone else at work that keeps stealing credit for your work and is getting the promotions that you deserve. You know what? There are things you can do about that. They may not be easy. You might be able to simply talk to your supervisor and get things straightened out, or you may need to look for a different job. But that is something that would be unfair and worth being upset about in its comparison. Judaism doesn't tell you the grass is always greener, so stop looking over the fence. Judaism tells you, yeah, sometimes things aren't what they appear. And sometimes, even when they are what they appear, they shouldn't take away any of the joy that you have for your life. And sometimes things are what they appear, and they are making your life worse. And at that point, we do something about it. Life is complicated. When you see simple aphorisms, when you see people passing out pamphlets that explain the mysteries of the universe, when you see somebody riding around with a bumper sticker that it purports to explain everything we need to know, Judaism says, yeah, no, that's not how life works. Life is a lot more complicated than that. And if you're not sure of whether it is the kind of thing that you can easily discount or not, or whether it's real or not, we do what Jews have always done. We complain to each other. And then the person can say, you know, it actually sounds like your HOA is pretty reasonable on this one. That's not such a problem. Your neighbor, yeah, you know, they may not be nice, but it's not really taking away from your own joy. Or, man, you got a problem there. You might want to talk to a lawyer. We've got a few at TI. I can put you in touch. Ultimately, that reality check does need that human element of interaction. And that's one of the beautiful things about being in a community like TI, is that you have people that you see week after week who will hear, who will listen, and God willing will also be honest with you of, you know what, forget about them. That's not a problem, that's not worth your trouble. Or, you know what, that's terrible. Let's see what we can figure out to do together. Shabbat Shalom.